When one begins to learn the teachings of Rabbi Nachman and to apply his advice in earnest, to receive life force, energy, faith, connection, feeling intimacy with Hashem, something he had yearned for many, many years, maybe even his whole life, he'll notice something immediately. That people around him who seem to know much more than him discourage him from this path. Now at first this could be very confusing and very discouraging. Why? Because I feel like I finally found something which is speaking to me, which appears to be an even higher truth than whatever I experienced before. And it's actually getting me to keep the Torah and to keep the mitzvot, which really should be the dream of any rabbi, any scholar, anybody in the Jewish world. Whoever the figure is, however his teachings present themselves, if they're kosher, if they're based on the Torah, if they don't depart at all from the authenticity of the Torah in which it was given in its original form, so then why should it matter if this experience is different than the one which is considered normative? So Rabbi Nachman goes on to explain the reason is because the Shekhinah is in exile. The Shekhinah being the teachings of true tzaddikim. That's the Shekhinah, because Eliyahu Navi says that the Shekhinah is the oral Torah. That is the teachings which are said over by tzaddikim. Therefore, when a person comes to learn the teachings of tzaddikim, but it's in exile, so when you try to learn it, you're automatically going to have people who are not learning for the right reasons come and disparage you from moving forward in it. And this was not a concept that Rabbi Nachman made up. This was something that his great-grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov, fought his whole life for. To try to elucidate to people who were more learned, not to learn for the wrong reasons. Because be'emet, according to Kabbalah, and this is something very, very important that the Baal Shem Tov fought for very much, the exile of the world, the exile of Hashem from this world, the exile of the Shekhinah, the feminine dimension of godliness, the one that we can taste and touch and experience, the one that we all yearn for. It's put into exile by people who learn Torah not for the right reasons. So here we have a very big paradigm shift, because usually we think, the reason for the exile is because you have people who they're doing the wrong things, or maybe you have secular Jews who they're not doing the mitzvot, right? Everybody has their whole host of concoctions for why things go wrong in the world, especially in the religious world. There's many different explanations that are given. Why are we in such a troubled state of existence? However, according to the Baal Shem Tov, according to Rabbi Nachman, the problem begins and ends actually with people who learn Torah not for the right reasons. Because what happens to that Torah is it ends up going to the Sitra Achra, to the other side. So therefore, when a person comes to learn the teachings of a real tzaddik, those teachings right now are in the hands of Lavan, who is, Rabbi Nachman explains, this Torah scholar who's learning for the wrong reasons. And he uses his knowledge of Torah to oppress the one who's learning for the right reasons. In this case, he calls him the lower tzaddik. So as opposed to this upper tzaddik, who we're calling Yaakov, we're calling the lower tzaddik his son Benjamin, right? In that case, that is the person who's learning those teachings. So in this case, when we come to learn Rabbi Nachman's teachings, who in this case is the tzaddik emet, the true tzaddik, so when we learn his teachings, automatically we're going to have people that oppose both Rabbi Nachman and us. So first thing that we should take out of this is you should get chizuk when people are discouraging you from moving forward in this path. Because be'emet, this should be every religious person's dream, that a person should come along and teach you the teachings of the Torah and get you to want to learn them more than you ever have, to pray more than you ever did. And yet on the other hand, you have everybody telling you not to move forward with this. Many people actually move off completely because of this. They get so discouraged from this that they feel like something must be wrong. How could a person who knows so much more than me actually discourage me from learning these teachings? It must be that this is some non-normative sect of Judaism, and it's not really what I think it is, and the rabbit hole goes much deeper than this, and I'm not learned enough to know that, and this person is helping me. However, Rabbi Nachman is saying it's not true. In fact, if you will find the real tzaddik's teachings and you learn them in earnest, in the exile, it has to be that there are going to be people who know more than you who come and tell you not to move forward with it. Okay, But then Rabbi Nachman's going to come and say, but Hashem wants it this way. And at the end of this lesson, we're going to find out why would Hashem wanted that for a true tzaddik and his students, there must be a lavan, someone who is very learned, who's opposing him from doing so. So this, B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to get at towards the end of the lesson. But Rabbi Nachman says like this, but we have a question. If there's a difficulty which is arising in your mind based on this premise, if this Tana, if this person who gave over these teachings, which we're going to say is Rabbi Nachman now, is it tzaddik? He's a tzaddik gamor. He's a complete tzaddik. How does this matter even happen? Meaning that his Torah can have two implications. Mashma'ot tov, a good implication, meaning Sadiqim yechuvam, because we have a pasuk, it says Sadiqim walk in it, and Poshim, people who are not connected to Hashem, they are disconnected from authenticity in the spiritual path. They stumble in them. And the way that the pasuk usually reads, it sounds like it's saying that there are tzaddikim, that they are walking, meaning people who are spiritually inclined, who are humble, who are learning for the right reasons. And then you have the opposite, who are doing the opposite experience. However, Chazal end up telling us something very deep, which is that, no, they're both learning the same thing, except that people who learn for the right reasons are walking, meaning they're succeeding in what they're doing. They're getting closer to Hashem through this thing. And people who are not learning for the right reasons, they are not humble. They're not learning in order to get close to Hashem. They're learning in order to be contrarian or to oppose someone else, or to use it as some type of leverage in order to make something happen, in order to make money, in order to portray themselves as learned, whatever the reason may be. They are actually caused to stumble through the same exact teaching. So now a person might ask themselves, but if the person who created this teaching, this tzaddik, this Tana, is a complete tzaddik, how could it have these two kochot? How could it have these two capabilities? It should be that if you learn his teachings, automatically that person's going to come to do tshuva. He's going to want to be closer to Hashem. He's going to move beyond his lower self. Everyone should be like that. How could it be that certain people, they're getting closer to Hashem and they're becoming more and more humble, and on the other hand, you have another group of people, they're learning those same exact teachings and they're becoming more and more arrogant using those teachings themselves? Avalda, however, you should know, Hatanaya tzaddik amor, the tzaddik is a complete tzaddik. V'torto zakah mibli poselet. And his teachings are pure with no deficiency whatsoever. Umashenir b'mashmaot armumiot. And what that it appears that there must be some level of cunning in his teachings if people who are learning them are using them to mitigate and harbor resentment towards people who are learning for the right reasons. The reason is something very interesting. Because parnasa, livelihood, physical wealth and sustenance comes from the left side of spirituality. Kamoshe Katuv, like the pasuk says in Mishlei, Mismola osher v'chavod, that from the left side you have wealth and honor. Meaning, according to Kabbalah, you have, so to speak, two primary sides in which godliness is drawn down into this world. There is a right side and there is a left side. Now, at its source, there's no sides, the Zohar says. At the highest level, according to Kabbalah, which is called Atik, there's no sides, there's no right and there's no left. However, once we devolve down to this physical world, there becomes a right and a left side with which to draw sustenance, with which to draw godliness. And the nature of this is in order to create free will, okay? So that we can choose good. What does the right side represent? Long life. That's what the pasuk says. So what's long life? Spiritual life. What about the left side? It draws wealth and honor. This is related to matters of physicality. Now, the nature of physicality is that we need it. If you live in the physical world, you need food, you need drinks, you need a home, you need livelihood in order to support yourself. However, because it's physical, because this world has a nature, has an affinity towards concealing the right side, right? It has a proclivity towards distancing one from Hashem if it's not utilized in the right way. So in that case, if a person's only focused on the left side, he does not receive from the right side. So this, they explain that if a person is learning for the right reasons, which is the case of the right side of spirituality, I'm drawing the teachings of Torah, I'm engaged in my spiritual life in order to get closer to Hashem, then he's drawing from the right side, okay? In which case the right side holds both the right and the left. This is also another principle in Kabbalah, that everything on the right side contains both the right and the left because the right gives birth to the left. So too, just like a parent, that they give birth to a child, the child was encompassed within the parents before they were given birth to. So in that sense, even though this child is the offspring of the parents and now has an existence in and of itself, but still at its source is encompassed within the parents. However, when you move to the left side is just pure physicality. It's just honor. It's things that are just designated for this world alone. So therefore, when you're only in pursuit of the left, you automatically cannot get the right. Whereas if you pursue the right, meaning spirituality, you can come out with both. However, the problem is that once the exile began and the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, so now as a result of that, wealth does not come from the right side now. It has to come through the left side only. The left side is the side which is very prone to the forces of negativity. That's the reason why Rabbi Nachman says in Sichot Haran that since the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, most people who are wealthy are not spiritually inclined individuals. What's the reason for that? Because wealth now comes through the left side. Whereas when the Beit HaMikdash stood, it came from the right side, and therefore you could be completely spiritually inclined and doing everything for the right reasons and still have what you need and more to live a good life physically as well as spiritually. However, since the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, now as a result of that, the consequence is that physicality, sustenance, has to be drawn down through the left side, which is very prone to the vulnerability of negative things like ego, like being caught in just running after physicality without any spirituality. And on top of that, let's say, for instance, you go to work, right? So in the past, let's say I went to work and everything was coming from the right side, which will be, again, Bezrat Hashem, when the Mashiach comes, things will be rectified. So then in that case, when I went to go work, I had no concern about, could I fall into the desire for money beyond my spiritual life? There was no such thing, because I'm doing everything for the right reasons and I'm still getting it. But now I have to run the risk of I'm going to make money and I might end up spending many more hours than I even needed to work. Why? Because once I'm already here and I'm involved with the left side, it's very easy to fall into only the left side. So it's a big concern, right? So in this case, Rabbi Nachman says like this: Bishvil ze nafal tana b'sha'at amirat torto la'eze shagia daka kechut asa'ara. Because now that wealth and riches and honor only comes through the left side, the Tana, this great Sadiq, when he teaches his Torah, he needs to have a little bit of an oversight, like so minuscule, so minute, but it's on the left side. And the reason this happens to this great tzaddik, that even though he has no interest in physicality whatsoever, he doesn't think about it at all. However, for sustenance to come to the students of the tzaddik in a way which is healthy, in a way which is blessed, it needs to come from the tzaddik, but the tzaddik's not interested in physicality, in livelihood. So then how does he end up giving it over? So Hashem makes it that when he gives over his teachings, he very slightly falls into the left side when he gives it over. In this way, the world is given parnasa, but in a kosher way, in a way which helps people, in a way which is a blessing for those who draw the parnasa. It draws to them wealth and honor. Like it says, from the left side is wealth and honor. However, when it comes to the tzaddik himself, there's no crookedness or perversion. He has no interest in honor. He has no interest even in wealth. However, for the sake of bringing sustenance into the world, he needs to fall, so to speak, to the left side, even so minutely when he teaches, in order that we should draw sustenance from him in this way. And therefore, the person who comes to learn Torah, he needs to know before he learns. In the time that he sits down to learn this tzaddik's teachings, that tzaddik shebegan eden sayet lekale. The tzaddik is hearkening to his voice in Gan Eden. Kamosh Katuv, like it says in Shir Shirim. Hayoshevet beganim chaverim makshivim lekolech. You who dwell in the gardens, meaning Gan Eden, companions hearken to your voice. So this is an amazing thing. We learned previously that when a lower tzaddik, meaning a kosher Jew who learns for the right reasons, comes to learn the great tzaddik's teachings, then, so to speak, the tzaddik's life force is infused within the lower tzaddik, within the kosher student. And this is where all of his blessing comes from. This is where all of his das comes from. This is where his newfound desire to grow closer to Hashem comes. It's coming from, so to speak, he's kissing the tzaddik. And that's the secret of what the Gemara says, that the tzaddik's lips move in the grave when you say over his teachings. Meaning, they're moving because they're kissing. Okay? And how does that work? Because he's actually listening in Gan Eden, that when someone says the tzaddik's teachings, he's listening intently for that student who's kosher to be saying over his teachings, and it's giving him tremendous delight. And then, so to speak, they are intimately connecting at that moment, and that's where the student is drawing his blessing from. And this is like it says in the Pasuk, that when Lavan heard the name Yaakov, the son of his sister, meaning, that when the person who comes to learn, he knows the name Yaakov, that is, that Yaakov is the son of his sister, Bechina Kashrut, because Yaakov said over to Rachel, that I am the son, I'm the son of Lavan, your father's sister, but I'm also the nephew of your father. Meaning to say that I have these two capabilities. That on the one hand, for the person who's not learning for the right reasons, they're going to draw cunning from my lessons. They're going to draw further away from Hashem by learning my teachings. However, b'tzad the people who are kosher, the people who are learning for the right reasons, they are actually on the side of Rivka. That means that they're going to get closer to Hashem. Just like the Torah, it says in the Gemara that the Torah has, it can either be an elixir of life or elixir of death, and it depends on who's learning it, right? So we see that just like the Torah can either be something which is life-giving, life-infusing, life-changing for the better, it can also be the opposite, where it can completely derail a person's life. And all of it depends on why am I learning. If the person's learning to get closer to Hashem, it's a spice of life. If he's learning for any other reason, let's say in order to become wealthy, in order to show people that he's smart, in order to put down other individuals to show them that they know less, whatever the reason may be, then it actually causes him to derail even more than he would have if he never learned it to begin with. So too, we're learning that the tzaddik emet, this true tzaddik, who is like the Ruach Elokim marchevet al pnei hamayim, that it said in the beginning of creation that the Ruach of Hashem, the spirit of godliness was hovering over the water, and Rabbi Nachman explains that the water is Torah. And the nature of the tzaddik emet is he's hovering over the water, meaning that he's fully encompassed within the water of Torah always, like Moshe Rabbeinu, that he was in the water, right? He's always in the water. So too, just like the water itself can either be life or death for the one who drinks it, depending on why they're drinking it, so too, the tzaddik who's in the water always, his teachings have the same possible effect. And that's why you see, with Rabbi Nachman's teachings, for a person who learns for the wrong reasons, he ends up coming and opposing Breslov Chassidus, all the students of Rabbi Nachman, including Rabbi Nachman himself. However, on the other hand, if a person comes to learn for the right reasons, they have the complete opposite effect. Whereas they might have felt stuck, or they felt troubled, or they felt broken, or they felt like nothing could help him. And now all of a sudden, by learning these teachings, he's feeling himself getting closer and closer to Hashem, to the Torah, to his own godly soul, and revealing it in the world. Because all of it depends on, why am I learning this thing? Shemad v'amar zot Torah bekashrut lishma. That the one who's learning it, it says this is the Torah for the one who's kosher, he knows the name of Yaakov, meaning the Tana. Tzayet lekala, that he knows that Yaakov, meaning the Tzaddik Emet, is in Gan Eden, listening to me say over his teachings, and he's listening intently. And we end up having Nashikin, we end up having this spiritual kiss where he is infusing his life force into me. V'yaratz likrato michabek u'mineshak lo. And it says afterwards that Lavan ran to greet Yaakov. In this case, what does it mean? That the tzaddik is coming to run, to kiss, and to hug you because you're learning his teachings for the right reasons. And then, mitabek ruach atana barucho. The ruach, the life force, the spiritual power of the tzaddik ends up infusing the one who is learning. And that's the concept of nishikin, kisses. And brought him into his house. Why? Because the ruach of this great tzaddik, the Tana, that's within his Torah, when you learn it now, that's his home. Because it says in the Gemara that a person's wife is his home. And we just said that the Shekhinah, the feminine dimension of godliness, is actually the oral Torah that the tzaddikim teach. So when the tzaddikim teach Torah, or let's say for instance, we're learning Likutey Moharan, this is Rabbi Nachman's Torah. So Rabbi Nachman, being this tremendous tzaddik, he's like Yaakov Avinu. And in that case, his Rachel is this teachings. That's his wife, that's his home. So when we're learning his teachings for the right reason, then he's running out to greet us, to kiss us, to hug us. And on top of that, what happens? He brings us to his home, meaning his teachings. Like the pasuk says, let the earth give forth a living soul. And we said before, that the earth is a code word for the Shekhinah. And the Shekhinah is these teachings, the teachings of the tzaddik. So therefore, the teachings of the tzaddik bring forth a living soul. Why? Because the ruach, the spirit of the tzaddik, enters into you when you learn his teachings. I just want to tell you just as a practical experience that I had, and a lot of people have experiences like this. Some people handle them differently, and it's very, very important to talk out these things. I'm not going to say any names because it's not important. But just so you know what happens when you try and learn these teachings, so you're not confused and you're not overwhelmed, because you need to know. Every single person who comes to learn Rabbi Nachman's teachings and actually devotes himself to wanting to grow spiritually in this way, he will see people say things to him that he never thought they would say. He would see that people oppose him that he would never thought would oppose him. Why? Because he would think that on the other hand, this person would be so happy for me. I'm finally connecting. And on the other end, he's saying no. I remember when I was in Queens, I had started Sion Breslov project. And as soon as I started the organization, I had started having people say crazy stuff about me. Like wild stuff. And for me, it's okay. I don't care. Because I know why I'm learning and I know why I'm teaching, and so it doesn't bother me. But my students, right, they take it very personal. And also it's probably confusing for them. Why are they saying that the person who's teaching me, there's something wrong with him? Why are they saying that Rabbi Nachman is this and the people who learn from him are this? So it's confusing and it's overwhelming. So I remember one time I had a student who was very close to me in Queens, and he went to a yeshiva. And the people in the yeshiva hadn't seen him for a while. And when he was in yeshiva, he struggled a lot. He got in trouble a lot. He got in trouble with drugs. He got in trouble at school with behavioral issues, right? And so people probably just gave up on him and never thought he would be able to find his way. And then he found Rabbi Nachman's teachings, and he did tshuva. Big time. Doing his spotadus for hours in the field, learning Torah day and night, helping other Jews who are in very difficult, challenging situations, people who struggle with drugs, people who struggle with alcohol, people who struggle with mental health issues, and he's looking to try and help all of them now. So when he asked him, what are you up to? Someone at the yeshiva, someone who works there. So he said, I actually learned Breslov Chassidus with Rabbi Kalmus. And we learn every single night. So the person who was listening to him, he made like a face. So Benjamin, my student asked him, wipe that out for a second, because I'm not going to do the class. I'm not saying last name, I'm not saying the person we spoke to either, but there it is. So my student asked him, why are you like making a face? Why do you look like, what's wrong? So he said, Rabbi Kalmus is an apicorsis. So anybody who doesn't know, an apicorsis is like someone who denies the veracity of the Torah, and he denies the existence of God, and he's a very big danger. He's like the biggest danger to anybody in the world, okay? So my student was very taken aback, and he said, why do you say that? So he begins to say all these things about me. And my student was so troubled by all the things he was saying, and he wanted to respond and say well, what are you talking about? You don't even know him. He said, have you ever spoken to him before? He said, no. He said, have you ever been to one of his classes? He said, no. So he's thinking, how could you say all these things about him? And he even came up to me. He's like, do you know this person is doing an hour of Yibodedut every single day, and he's learning all day and night, and he's trying to help Jewish people? Do you even know this person? So when he came to me afterwards, he was really disturbed. And he said to me, why is this person saying this about you? So it ended up being that we ended up learning this teaching together, this lesson together, not even on purpose, it just came up. That a person who either is the tzaddik emet, right, in this case is like Rabbi Nachman, or those people who are his students, who are learning for the right reasons and giving it over to others, not for themselves, but only to help others, right? So when that happens, automatically Rabbi Nachman is saying they're going to have people who oppose them. So I told my student not to respond, not to say anything to him, just to let it go, everything's going to be fine. And it was really hard for him to do that. Very, 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 very difficult. And he had to fight with himself, every fiber of his being, not to respond, not to say anything back, not to go back to him, not nothing. Didn't say anything. All of a sudden, weeks go by, and I'm in the middle of teaching a class in a group of guys, and my student walks in with an intensity, a fervor, and he walks over to me and he said, David, you have to see this. And I said, okay, just give me a second, I'm just saying something over to the guys. He goes, you have to see this now. So it looked very serious. He looked very disturbed. So I told the guys who I was with, I was like, sorry, just give me a few minutes. We'll come back together. So my student showed me a video. And in this video, there was this person who was saying, there's this new project called Breslov project. And this Rabbi David Yisrael Kalmus is putting up these beautiful classes. And they're so honest and they're so genuine. And it's based on Kabbalah and Chassidut, and everything that he's saying is mamish truthful. It's mamish emet. And my student is his eyes are tearing up as he's showing this to me. So he said to me, do you know who this is? I said, no. So he said, you remember that person that I told you from the yeshiva? He said all these things about you. So I said, yeah. So he said, this is his brother. So I was like, okay. And he said that I called the person from the yeshiva after I saw this, that his brother put up this video on his own YouTube channel. He's also a rabbi, also a teacher. And he said, did you see this? So he sent it to him. He didn't see it. And then he watched it. And he responded back to my student, wow, I was 100% wrong about him. I'm sorry I ever said anything. Blah, 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 blah. And my student was so disturbed, how fickle this person was, that he was saying not just negative things, the worst possible things you could say about somebody. And then on top of that, almost completely derailed my student from continuing to learn, and that was his whole life force. That was his whole energy. That was his yearning every day, was to grow in this, and he got completely cooled off and got so confused. It could have been, if it was somebody else, they would have just stopped learning completely, right? How great of a danger that is. Like, there's no greater danger in the world. But this person, obviously in this case, not learning for the right reasons, ends up coming out from those same teachings saying the opposite and actually opposing people who are learning for the right reasons. But when he heard his brother, who apparently is learning Rabbi Nachman's teachings for the right reason, right, he came out with the opposite perspective. Why? Because Rabbi Nachman is saying something very deep. That a person who learns for the right reasons, he's able to see the purity of the tzaddik. He's able to see the truthfulness of the tzaddik. He's able to see that there is nothing puzzle. There is nothing which is deficient. Why? Because he is coming to it in a kosher way. He's coming to it with selfless reasons to get closer to Hashem. But the vulnerability of the tzaddik's teachings is that a person who comes for the wrong reasons, meaning he himself has not rectified his ego, he himself is still cunning, he is still, everything he does is for the sake of self-aggrandizement, or in order to make money, or in order that people should look at him a certain way. So when he reads the Sadiq's teachings, he actually draws more cunning from that place. And Rabbi Nachman ends up saying that all of this is from Hashem. Hashem wants it like this, and we're going to see at the end of this lesson why that's the case. So just to conclude this section, or this part of the section that we're in, for everybody to understand, this is very, very important. Just because you have opposition to your spiritual journey, do not ever take that as meaning that it's not true what you're doing, or that you're not in the right place. It's adrabah, it's the opposite. If your mind is in the right place, if your heart is in the right place, and if the teacher who you're learning from is getting you to keep the Torah more than you ever did before, to want to pray more, to want to learn more, to want to be more spiritually inclined, to want to be less selfish, and the list goes on and on and on, and you see other people tell you that this is not good, that you're barking up the wrong tree, that you're doing something that could potentially be damaging for you. And even if that person is much more learned than you in the Gemara, in Halacha, and in all aspects of the oral Torah, you should take from it the opposite. You should take tremendous chizuk that this is the emet, that this is the truth. And I had this with my students all the time, that once they learn lessons like this, that Rabbi Nachman speaks about it, they start to get almost like this happiness, this joy from when people are out of nowhere are saying negative things to them about the teachings, because it's like corroborating the truthfulness of it in a paradoxical way. I have another student who also, like when we're doing these teachings, he was in a shul near where I lived, and all of a sudden, someone was learning Rabbi Nachman's teachings, and he said the name Rabbi Nachman out loud. And another person was there, an older individual, a father with a wife, with kids, like a balabas, a person who works in a normative job during the day and learns Torah, whatever, goes to minyan. He starts to curse at this person, and he starts to threaten him physically about Breslov, about Rabbi Nachman, about this whole thing, threatening him literally to the point that they had to call the police. Now, if you think about it, like if you could just zoom out for a second, imagine someone said someone's name, right, about some teachings, and these teachings were bringing them much closer to Hashem and getting them to want to keep the mitzvot. For other people around to then say that this is the worst thing possible, right? This is a horrifying situation. That doesn't make any sense. It literally makes no sense. How could it be that a rabbi or a teacher who's drawing you so close could be doing so much damage? It literally doesn't make any sense. And yet you see, with the name of Rabbi Nachman, you either have people who they literally think it's the greatest thing in the world. They feel that it has wisdom and healing and advice that's nowhere else to be found, not in the non-Jewish world, not in the Jewish world, not in the Lithuanian world, not in the Hasidic world, right? But then you have the complete opposite, that you have people who think that this is the worst thing in history, this is the greatest travesty in the Jewish world, and it's the cause of so much destruction and dismay. However, all of this, Rabbi Nachman should show you the truth of the tzaddik, because this is the nature of this great tzaddik, that his teachings have this dual element. They have the ability to make a person who is learning for the right reasons see its truth and want to draw closer to Hashem through this thing, which takes time, patience, waiting. But on the other hand, for the person who does not learn for the right reasons, when he gets to this tzaddik's teachings, it causes him to spiral out in the opposite way. He sees deception in the tzaddik himself because it's his own deception. Like Rav Natan speaks about in Likutey, where he speaks about Yosef and his brothers and how they threw him into a pit. Why did they throw him into a pit? Because they saw Yosef as being a threat to the Jewish life. They saw Yosef as being the greatest threat to their father's dream. That the world should come to know Hashem, that there should be deep spiritual connection in the world, deep spiritual infusion in the world. And they saw Yosef, this towering spiritual figure, this unique, original figure who is bringing down new, original ideas. And he has this personality which is different, which is unique. They see him as a tremendous threat, and they throw him into the pit. They put him into exile. So Rav Natan explains there, what's the reason that they saw something wrong with Yosef? So he says something amazing. He says that the pasuk says that Yosef was 17. That's how they introduce Yosef. But you never see anywhere in the Torah that they introduce somebody by their age. So obviously there's something that we learn very deeply about Yosef. We know that Yosef is the archetypal tzaddik emet. He's the archetypal true tzaddik in the Torah. This tzaddik who is this all-encompassing spiritual figure who his teachings are at another level, his advice is at another level, and everyone needs Yosef in order to draw closer to Hashem. And that's why everybody during the famine had to come down to Mitzrayim, to Yosef. Even the non-Jewish world had to come to Yosef. Everybody had to come to Yosef. Okay? So why was it said he was 17? Because Rav Natan explains that the gematria of 17 is the gematria for tov, good. And Yosef was kulo tov. He was entirely good. He had nothing puzzle whatsoever. He had no derivative. He had nothing which wasn't pure. He was completely good. And that's why it said that he was 17 years old. Because his essence was that he was 17. He was tov. His brothers threw him into the pit, and they saw all of his comments and all of his dreams and all of his teachings as being threatening. And anybody who wanted to connect to him as being threatening. Why? Because Rav Natan said, even though that his brothers were good, they weren't completely good. They weren't only good. And even if they're 99% good, they weren't only good. And because they weren't only good, that little bit that wasn't, that little bit that was still rooted in ego, that little bit that was still chasing after money or fame, that little bit that still was not rectified, was projected onto Yosef. And as a result of that, they ended up selling him into slavery, exiling him, thinking of him in the worst possible ways, even though really be'emet, he was the key towards their father's dreams coming true. And that's why Yaakov, it said that he was waiting for his son's dreams to come true. Because Yaakov understood that Yosef was kulo tov, he was only good. But his brothers, not being only good, but being mostly good, ended up projecting their own lackings onto Yosef. Everybody have an amazing, amazing day. Bezrat Hashem, this should give you chizuk, that if you have found Rabbi Nachman's teachings to be enlightening, to be empowering, to be encouraging, and you have other people telling you not to move forward, you should take this only as the greatest sign in the world. I have a true tzaddik that I'm learning his teachings from, and this is going to get me to Hashem. This is going to bring the lost princess out of exile for me. This is going to end the exile itself.